Listen, I don't really give a
No, I give a
because at the end of the day, you know what matters? Everything gets done around here. Every bike that needs to get built gets done. Everybody's working at all times. And you know what? 10 years, this is the kind of stuff we've been dealing with for 10 years.
Yeah.
We're part this thing. We're involved here. Let me tell you something.
Listen,
if I wasn't involved, this go to it would burn to the
You know what? Get the out of here. And don't bother coming in tomorrow because you're terminated.
Good, it's about time!
Well, have I been waiting to make a video on this for a while now? And what better time is it to bring up this topic than now, as we are on the brink of Microsoft acquiring Activision Blizzard, who is arguably the biggest video game developer and publisher in the world. Now, this video is going to be going over the ongoing cesspool of absolute degeneracy that we all know as the console war, which seems to mainly occur on Twitter, which should be of no surprise to you lovely viewers. But as this is going to be my first video covering the console war, I feel like I should tell you in advance that I'm going to have a lot to cover in this video. So get your buckets of pony and Xbox salt ready and get comfy, because this is going to be one hell of a ride. And let me just preface one thing real quick. I have no problem whatsoever with anybody being a fanboy, so to speak. What I do have a problem with, however, is the toxic gaming fanatics who dedicate their whole lives around defending their favorite chunks of metal and plastic, as if it's really any different from the chunks of metal and plastic that they are constantly attacking. Like, these guys will base their whole personality around liking a certain console but hating the other, even posting every hour of the day to spew their absolute bullshit. But let me be clear, there's a good chance some of you are going to see this video and think, why does it seem like he's only going after Sony and their fan base? Well, that is because the vast majority of the pure idiocy coming from the console war is from Sony and their fan base. And that's not me being biased, it's just me seeing what's in front of me, and what's in front of me just happens to be a lot of pony salt. So without further ado, let's get into today's video as we dive into the rabbit hole that is the console war. Now, I wanted to start off this video by first going over the console war as it exists on social media, mainly Twitter, just so we can get the most cancerous part of the video out of the way first. Then I will be going into the Microsoft deal with Activision Blizzard and Sony's response to it, but that won't be until later in the video, so just sit here for as long as you can, and I promise you will enjoy it. So the first tweet I wanted to go over is this one right here, with this guy saying,
"Things have been rough for Xbox this month. I've barely played any games on it, and I'm still #1 on the leaderboard. With all the delays and pushbacks, can we all agree that Xbox still has no games?"
So just in case you guys aren't aware, one of the things that PlayStation fanboys, or ponies, love to talk about is that Xbox has no games. Obviously they don't mean that literally, but instead they love to compare the number of games that Xbox has compared to the number of games that PlayStation has, especially when it comes to games that are exclusive on either platform. Think Halo for Xbox and God of War for PlayStation. But back to this tweet here, this person is talking about how he has hardly played any games on Xbox but is still #1 on his friend leaderboard when it comes to gamer score, which you get by completing achievements and games on Xbox. Now keep in mind how this person has over 1900 gamer score in just the month of January. 1900 gamer score is not a small amount of gamer score by any means. I mean, I have a little over 37,000 gamer score and I've been playing Xbox games ever since 2007. But what I really wanted to get at here is the fact that this person says, can we all agree that Xbox still has no games? Well, he is obviously playing a good amount of games, especially to be able to get over 1900 gamer score in a month. I also found a screenshot of this same person with a gamer score of over 2200 in a month, and with a total gamer score of almost 29,000. So this person has obviously played a ton of games on Xbox, and there's no denying it, he is speaking straight out of his ass. Stuff like this just shows how well some of these guys' points are thought out. Like, this guy somehow thought it was a good idea to say Xbox has no games, but then proceeds to show us how he has been playing a lot of Xbox games. You really can't make this shit up. Another thing that console fanboys seem to do a lot is compare graphics between games on either console to try and prove that their console is superior, often taking screenshots from one game that make it look bad, and then matching it up against a screenshot from a game from their own favorite console that makes it look good, which is essentially what cherry picking means in the context of the console war. Like with this tweet right here, this person says,
Cross-gen Horizon Crabs versus next-gen Hellblade. We can clearly see that Guerrilla is a top-tier studio and Ninja Theory are mid-untalented with no ability to manage resources to produce a next-gen game.
They then attach a picture from Horizon Forbidden West, a PlayStation exclusive developed by Guerrilla Games, and then another from Hellblade 2 Senua's Saga, an Xbox exclusive game developed by Ninja Theory. The logic of this person who made this tweet is essentially just like saying, look, this screenshot from 1 second of a PlayStation game looks good, and this screenshot from 1 second of an Xbox game looks bad. Therefore, Guerrilla is an amazing developer, and Ninja Theory are all untalented and can't make games that look good. Like, yeah, I can cherry pick screenshots from both of those games that completely flip the point you're trying to make. Like this, and this, and this. See, it's not that hard, anyone can do it. There was an instance where an Xbox fanboy, or Xbot, cherry-picked a screenshot from Rise 2013 and a screenshot from God of War Ragnarok to show that an Xbox game back in 2013 looks better than the new God of War game released this year as a sort of gotcha moment. Well, it turns out, the screenshot they used from Rise was actually part of a pre-released cutscene using CGI that the developers used to showcase their game before release, which is a very unfair way to compare the way that games look, especially when you compare it to something coming from just raw gameplay footage like with the God of War screenshots. It's like comparing a painting that an artist has been working on for months to a painting someone made in only 30 minutes. It's just a terrible comparison to make. But you better believe the ponies came running to get on top of this tweet, with this one saying,
That Rise shot is literally from the pre-release CGI cutscene. They're using CGI against Sony's games. Don't do it. That's the highest form of adulation.
Now remember that cherry pick from earlier with the screenshot of the crabs from Horizon Forbidden West and the screenshot from Hellblade 2? The same Sony fanboy who made that tweet criticizing that cherry pick from Rise and God of War posted his own tweet piggybacking off of that crab tweet from earlier, posting the same 2 screenshots along with it. Well, it also turns out, actually, that the screenshot of the crabs from Horizon Forbidden West was actually taken from the announcement trailer of the game, which is a pre-release CGI cutscene, which this same pony is comparing to pre-release gameplay footage of Hellblade 2. So just like with the case with the Xbot cherry-picking from a CGI cutscene and comparing it to pre-release gameplay footage of God of War, this idiot is doing the same thing he literally just criticized earlier, but this time with a CGI cutscene from a PlayStation game and comparing it to pre-release gameplay from an Xbox game. Like they just said, don't use CGI against Xbox's games. That's the highest form of adulation. The same PlayStation fanboy from that whole fiasco is even going as far as inspecting the character models for Hellblade 2 to see if the model includes peach fuzz rendering. You know, the tiny face hairs that nearly every human on Earth has, in which you can still barely even tell is there in real life. This guy went out of their way to find the base character model from Hellblade 2, without the added face paint and all that, just so they can do some elaborate detective work and look for peach fuzz on the character model's face. Then when they don't find any, they continue to say,
This is what I presume is in the in-game character model from Hellblade 2. Now with no mud or water obfuscating the actual model details, apparently she still doesn't have peach fuzz on her face, neck, or ears. This means that the model is still much, much worse than Alloy in Horizon PS5.
So now this guy is comparing the character models of video games to see if they have fucking peach fuzz? While I think that peach fuzz rendering is actually a pretty cool feature and a cool innovation in video game graphics going forwards, this guy is acting like it's a deal breaker when it comes to video game models. So what now? Are they going to look at the character models from all games going forward, and if they don't have peach fuzz, he's going to say, well, this game is literally unplayable, this guy has no peach fuzz on his face. Like, nobody in the world actually cares that much about this kind of stuff, except for these people who seem to have nothing better to do than talk to a wall about how their favorite games have better character models just because they have more hair on their face. Now, if you didn't know, or maybe forgot by now, on January 31st of 2022, Sony had acquired Bungie, the developers of the Destiny franchise and previous developers of the Halo franchise, for $3.6 billion, in which ponies were quick to jump on the case and come up with some of the dumbest tweets in response.
Halo on PS5? LMAO, Halo on the PS5. Can't wait to play Halo on the PS5. The next Halo about to be a PS5 exclusive. So PlayStation about to make a better Halo? So, now that Sony owns Halo, when you want to join me in a game on PS5?
Are these people really this out of touch with reality that they don't know that Bungie doesn't make Halo games anymore? In fact, the last Halo game they developed was released 12 years ago. The fact that these people don't know that Bungie hasn't had anything to do with Halo for over a decade now shows us the lengths these people will go to talk shit about another console even when they know absolutely nothing about the thing they are celebrating. I mean, look at this guy right here.
PlayStation first party developed banger.
This guy took no time to celebrate Sony apparently owning Halo with this tweet talking about how PlayStation now has a first-party developed banger in Halo Combat Evolved, the first Halo game. Well, after some digging, it was found out that around 2 years ago or so, this same Twitter user said this.
The first Halo is dog shit, made by a mediocre studio, but what we expect from Xbox and Bungie? Exactly nothing.
This is the clearest video I've ever seen. This is the most HD shit ever. This is 4K. How did they get you in 4K?
That ain't me.
This user has since deleted this tweet because, to be honest, you would too if you were exposed for this level of hypocrisy. This dude really talked down on Halo and Bungie before the acquisition, but right after he found out that Sony bought Bungie, thinking Sony now owned Halo, he was quick to flip the script and act like he hadn't just talked shit about Halo and Bungie, while at the same time, not understanding that Halo doesn't even belong to Bungie anymore. You really cannot make this shit up. Now, something that has been talked about a lot recently when it comes to the console war is how PlayStation and Xbox are both increasing the prices of future first-party games to be $70 a piece. Well, PlayStation increased their prices around 2.5 years ago, while Xbox just announced this on December 5th. And when PlayStation announced this, they were met with some pretty harsh criticism from the gaming community about how it was anti-consumer and that Sony was being greedy. But when Xbox announced they were increasing their prices, well, the Xbots defended it like their lives depended on it. And their biggest excuse on why this is a good thing for Xbox is that these first-party games that are getting increased prices will be on Xbox Game Pass anyways, so it's no big deal. Look at this Xbot right here who said,
Launch at $70, but we'll be on Game Pass. I don't see a problem.
Now, you guys can argue amongst yourselves about whether or not increasing game prices to $70 is a good thing, but saying, we have Game Pass, so it's okay, we'll just get it for free day one when it launches, is such a lame excuse. This guy is talking about how it's okay for Xbox to pull this kind of stuff and using Game Pass as an excuse. But wouldn't it seem a bit shady if Microsoft were to increase the price of Game Pass just to take advantage of those trying to avoid having to pay $70 for a game? Not even mentioning the fact that a lot of people still buy physical copies because they either don't want to spend upwards of $10 a month for Game Pass, or just because they prefer to buy a physical copy so they can keep it forever. I also wanted to point out that the same Twitter user who posted that tweet I mentioned earlier also posted this tweet a couple days later, where he criticized PlayStation for being anti-consumer by keeping Final Fantasy XVI exclusive until 2024. So this guy is complaining about how PlayStation is being anti-consumer, but he will give Xbox a free pass on increasing prices just because they have Game Pass. I sorta kinda understand using Game Pass as an excuse, but the possibility of what Microsoft could do next totally doesn't seem anti-consumer to me at all. The level of hypocrisy that comes from these console fanboys is just never ending, isn't it? So, as if this just couldn't get any worse, a lady by the name of Estelle Tigani, a member of Santa Monica Studio and cinematics producer on God of War Ragnarok, tweeted this in June of this year. Pro tip, sending me dick pics asking for the God of War Ragnarok release date will not, in fact, get me to reveal the release date. To the people who are doing so, when did that ever work for you? So you're telling me Sony fanboys are now sending unsolicited penis pictures to developers and trying to get them to announce the release date early? And I can't say I'm totally surprised, but this definitely wasn't on my console fanboy bingo card if you catch my drift. Soon after this tweet was posted, Cory Barlog, former creative director for the God of War franchise, quote tweeted this. Are you fucking kidding me with this now? I cannot believe I even have to say this, but don't fucking send dick pics to anyone on this team, or anyone in this industry for that matter. They are busting their ass to make some for you to enjoy. Show some fucking respect. I think it's crazy to see all of these people who are fans of the God of War franchise preach about how their developers should be treated with the utmost respect, but then simultaneously do one of the most disrespectful things you can do online, and that is sending a woman a photo of your privates without their consent. Now, when Cory Barlog's tweet was posted and the internet started finding out about this, it didn't take very long for ponies to respond with some of the most ridiculous asinine tweets that I've probably ever seen. You're going to want to take a look at this.
I know for a fact there are Xbox fans boys who pretend to be PlayStation fans and do wild stuff to try to make PS fans look bad. It's a minority of people who do that, but it's messed up regardless. Put on blast who sent the duck pics, that way the entirety of the PlayStation community isn't thrown you dare to bust by Cory Barlog and all the rest of the Xbox fanboys on Twitter. Bad enough she went through this, but we aren't all pieces of shit. Release the dick's name.
So these guys will see that someone is harassing a developer, and their first thought is about how it affects the reputation of their community? Do these people have no empathy? I also wanted to point out that this guy is saying that the PlayStation community is being thrown under the bus by Cory Barlog and all the rest of the Xbox fanboys on Twitter. So does this mean that he is labeling Cory Barlog, a former developer for a PlayStation exclusive franchise, as an Xbox fanboy? This shows the mentality that these people have. It's absolutely ridiculous.
P.S. Why are you swearing so much? We get the point, it's noted.
Now this guy is complaining about Cory's tweet because he is swearing too much? The whole conversation is about someone getting sexually harassed via unsolicited Shlong pics, and it seems like this guy is getting offended by Cory using the F-bomb 3 times? Get the fuck out of here. Go back to playing your video games that are rated M for mature, which likely have dozens of curse words in them. If you're complaining about the F-word being used while this guy is trying to teach his audience to not sexually harass his employees, there's gotta be something wrong with you, to be honest. But if I'm going to be real with you, the tweets that really take the cake for this topic have got to be these right here.
It's simple. Give us what we want, and there won't be a problem. Capiche? Beach. We're the ones keeping them employed. They work for us. They're not making games out of the kindness of their heart. They're making them to sell them. They should be thanking us for giving them feedback and being passionate about their IP.
Saying the quiet part out loud, are we? This pony straight up acknowledged that this situation is as fucked up as it is, but continued to add more fuel to the fire. Instead of simply being patient and waiting for the release date to be announced, they would rather send dick pics to the developers as if it's going to make them announce the release date any faster. Then when they get backlash for it, they talk about how it's the developers' fault that the fan base was upset and sent them unsolicited nudes. Like, can't they just be a little bit patient? The game isn't going anywhere. The devs will announce the release date when they feel it's appropriate. And this guy is saying that the developers should be thanking them for giving them feedback and being passionate about their game. As if sexually harassing a developer is just showing their passion for the game and just giving them feedback. This stuff has got to be the dumbest shit I've ever seen on the internet. But what can I say? That's the internet for you. And with the ever-growing dumpster fire Twitter is becoming recently, there's almost just too much to talk about when it comes to the console war, so I'm sure you'll be pleased to hear that this will be all for this segment of today's video, as we move on to something a bit more important than a group of idiots embarrassing themselves on Twitter. Now, as I mentioned in the intro of this video, Microsoft has recently been in the process of acquiring Activision Blizzard, who are the sole owners of Call of Duty, World of Warcraft, Overwatch, and other big franchises in the gaming industry, which has a price tag of almost $70 billion. Well, to no surprise to anybody, Sony doesn't like this one bit. With Jim Ryan, who was the CEO of Sony Interactive Entertainment and basically the head of PlayStation, doing everything humanly possible to stop this acquisition from going through, claiming that giving Microsoft control of Activision games like Call of Duty would have major negative implications for gamers and the future of the gaming industry. After this statement from Jim Ryan, it was clear to most people that Sony was indeed afraid of losing Call of Duty to Xbox, even though Phil Spencer, CEO of Microsoft Gaming and head of Xbox, has reaffirmed everyone multiple times that they are committed to keeping COD on PlayStation. since stripping COD away from PlayStation, buyers would eventually kill sales of the franchise's games, and Microsoft and Activision would in turn lose a lot of money. Now, I just want to point out something I find very hypocritical with Jim Ryan's statement, which is that when marketing for the new Modern Warfare 2 started ramping up, it was revealed that players would be getting exclusive benefits that are only available to people playing on PlayStation, like early access to the game, Battle Pass bundle bonuses, monthly XP boosts, free bundles every season, bonus weapon XP while partied up, and extra loadout slots. It was even revealed after Modern Warfare 2 released that PlayStation users are allowed to toggle cross-platform play on or off whenever they choose to, while users on Xbox and PC have been stripped of that option, therefore forcing them to match up with people on other platforms whether they like it or not. Now, while none of this technically gives PlayStation users an advantage over other players, it still doesn't sit quite right with me how Jim Ryan would cry about how Microsoft controlling games like Call of Duty is bad for the players or even harmful to the industry, while Sony is, at the same time, locking benefits behind exclusivity deals such as these, and getting Activision to strip the fundamental option to choose who you play with away from users simply because they don't play on PlayStation. I mean, it's not like Sony has been bribing studios to avoid dealing with Game Pass, right? Microsoft claims Sony pays for blocking rights to keep games off Xbox Game Pass. The explosive claim was made in legal docs filed with Brazilian regulators this week. Oh, you know what? Let's just move on from that for just this moment. So, ever since news about Microsoft acquiring Activision broke, ponies all over social media went back and forth from trying to do damage control for Sony's benefit by saying that this isn't a big deal, and then to saying that Microsoft is a monopoly, and that Microsoft is going to ruin the gaming industry by simply buying Activision. Let's go ahead and take a look at some of the salt that's been produced recently.
Another thing, what? Now you have what? Spyro and Crash Bandicoot? Knock yourself out, have fun, by all means. Here's the thing, you guys are taking our old products, right? It's like you're screwing our ex and then putting it in our face.
Now, if you don't already know who this is, this very salty individual you just saw in that clip is the amazing Lucas, who is an extremely avid PlayStation fanboy. All that really happens in this video is just Lucas trying to downplay the biggest acquisition in gaming history, which he continues to call a nothing burger, and even saying we should, quote, knock ourselves out playing Spyro and Crash Bandicoot when those franchises aren't even half as big as Overwatch, World of Warcraft, and fucking Call of Duty. I think we all know what Lucas would be saying right now if Sony were the ones to acquire Activision, and it definitely wouldn't be called a nothing burger then, would it?
This was apparently a move for the metaverse. They don't even have their own virtual reality headset yet, all right? What are you talking about, Xbox? What are you doing?
He continues to bash on Xbox for not having a virtual reality headset like PlayStation does, and it's funny that he brings this up because I'd probably guess that one of the reasons Xbox doesn't have a virtual reality headset is because they don't need to make one to stay relevant, but I digress.
There's this sad misconception where they think PlayStation users are salty. Salty over what exactly? I don't understand. Like even with the PC releases, why would I be salty over you paying $50 for a 4-year-old game that I can purchase right now in the PlayStation Store for $20? Why would I be salty?
Wait. Lucas, now you're talking about how good it is to have God of War for cheaper on the PlayStation Store? The person who said himself that he just pre-ordered the most expensive edition of God of War Ragnarok without even looking at it is now worrying about the price difference for PC users? If you don't know what I'm talking about, just allow me to roll this clip for you guys.
Now, you already know I'm going to get the most expensive edition that they have. I don't know. I haven't even looked at it.
So, Lucas thinks he can get away with bashing PC players for a price difference when he pre-ordered the God of War Ragnarok Jotnar edition for $260, simply because it was the most expensive edition. Not because of the content that was included in the bundle, but only because it was the most expensive edition available for purchase. Man, this is the kind of consumer that CEOs like Jim Ryan absolutely love. People who would just blindly pre-order a game for $260 have absolutely no business bragging about a $30 decrease on the PlayStation Store. Because if there's anyone I'm going to take advice on consumer awareness from, it definitely wouldn't be Lucas. I mean, what do you expect from someone wearing a shirt like this? Also, remember that one pony from earlier in this video who was trying to defend Sony fanboys for sending unsolicited dick pics to a developer for the new God of War release date? That, ladies and gentlemen, was actually the Amazing Lucas. So that should tell you enough of what kind of a channel the Amazing Lucas is, so I'm going to spare you guys from having to endure any more of this, so you don't end up developing the same mental illness that I got from having to watch this. So while Sony fanboys like Lucas here are downplaying the acquisition of Activision Blizzard, calling it a nothing burger, Sony was scared shitless about the possibility of losing Call of Duty, which is just one of about the half a dozen games Activision Blizzard is comprised of. This is what Sony said in a response to Microsoft announcing the acquisition. According to a 2019 study, the importance of Call of Duty to entertainment in general is indescribable. The brand was the only video game IP to break into the top 10 of all entertainment brands among fans, joining powerhouses such as Star Wars, Game of Thrones, Harry Potter, and Lord of the Rings. Call of Duty is so popular that it influences users' choice of console, and its community of loyal users is entrenched enough that even if a competitor had the budget to develop a similar product, it would not be able to rival it. Now, this response is where the concerns of Call of Duty and the possibility of it being taken away from PlayStation users started, which would pretty much pave the way for Sony and their fanbase's arguments against this acquisition until this very day. I know I mentioned this earlier in this segment, but at around mid-September of this year, Jim Ryan came out with a statement saying that giving Microsoft control of Activision games like Call of Duty would have major negative implications for gamers and the future of the gaming industry, in which Tom Warren, a journalist specialized in gaming, was quick to call out the hypocrisies that come with making such a statement. Sony, giving Microsoft control of Activision games like Call of Duty would have major negative implications for gamers and the future of the gaming industry. Also Sony. I would also like to state for the record that at this point Phil Spencer, head of Xbox, had stated multiple times that Microsoft is committed to keeping Call of Duty on PlayStation, and had also reached out to Sony proposing a 3-year deal that would ensure Call of Duty would stay on PlayStation for at least 3 more years while Sony figured everything out. But that didn't stop Jim Ryan, the head of PlayStation, from pushing his narrative further. Since making his statement, Jim Ryan has been pleading with market regulators all over the world who deal with protecting consumers from unfair business practices, like the European Commission, CADE, the CMA, and the FTC, to try and convince them that Microsoft would gain an unfair market advantage over them if they were to eventually acquire Activision Blizzard, essentially telling these regulators that Microsoft would just be too OP for Sony to compete with if the deal were to go through. The first of these regulators to respond to Sony was CADE, who is a competition regulator for Brazil, who stated in their response that, "Furthermore, it is important to highlight that the central objective of CADE's activities is the protection of competition as a means of promoting the well-being of Brazilian consumers, and not the defense of the particular interest of specific competitors." So basically, the regulators in Brazil kindly told Sony that this acquisition isn't their problem, in which they quickly approved this acquisition without any restrictions. Shortly after, we got some more information on what's been going on behind closed doors with the regulators in other parts of the world. Microsoft said that on November 11th it offered Sony a 10-year deal to keep Call of Duty on PlayStation. Sony declined to comment on the offer. Are you kidding me? A 10-year deal and Jim Ryan turned it down? Or even better, they straight up ignored it? And I was thinking 3 years was pretty generous. 10 years is a long time for Sony to figure out what to do without Call of Duty. And all things considered, there's a chance that Call of Duty won't even be around 10 years from now. So much can happen in 10 years, I'm surprised Sony didn't just sign the agreement just to have everything on paper, so they didn't have to worry about Xbox pulling a 180 and making COD exclusive. This deal is exactly what Jim Ryan would have wanted, which is to keep COD on PlayStation, so it seriously makes me wonder why he turned this down after all. Last month, Mr. Spencer and other Microsoft executives brought an Xbox, a PlayStation, a Nintendo Switch, and other devices to a meeting with regulators in London, where they showed off Call of Duty and other games to illustrate a dynamic market, people familiar with the visit said. Wait, so you're telling me Phil Spencer had to fly all the way to London to talk to some people that don't even know how video games work? He literally had to bring a few consoles, sit them down on the table, and say, "This is an Xbox, this is a PlayStation, and this is a Nintendo Switch." He had to try and explain to them how you can play one game on multiple consoles as if they were all 6 years old. But no, these guys are likely a bunch of old people in black suits whose only experience with playing games is Pong, Galaga, and Tennis for Two. I bet you've never heard of that one, have you? Regulators are also worried what the deal might mean for the future, when cloud computing lets people stream sophisticated games to various devices, including mobile phones. When? Cloud gaming is already a thing. We can already play games right from our phones using cloud streaming, and these regulators are worried about what this deal might mean in the future when this will happen? This shows us that these regulators know nothing about gaming, because if they did, they would already know that cloud gaming has been a thing for a little over 3 years now. So what are they concerned about, since this has obviously had no negative effects on the industry when this has already been out for this long? So, to make a statement and show everyone that they are serious about keeping Call of Duty available to everyone, including PlayStation users, Phil Spencer posts on Twitter on December 6th, saying this: Microsoft has entered into a 10-year commitment to bring Call of Duty to Nintendo following the merger of Microsoft and Activision Blizzard King. Microsoft is committed to helping bring more games to more people, however they choose to play. I'm also pleased to confirm that Microsoft has committed to continue to offer Call of Duty on Steam simultaneously to Xbox after we have closed the merger with Activision Blizzard King. Phil Spencer even said in an interview that, from where we sit, it's clear Sony's spending more time with the regulators than they are with us to try and get this deal done. Which should tell you all you need to know about the mindset Sony is currently in. Jim Ryan would rather cry to regulators claiming that Microsoft is being unfair, but when Microsoft reaches out to Sony to try and get an agreement done so that both parties will be happy, they would rather ignore it and keep crying that Microsoft is being unfair. And as if things couldn't get any worse, it was announced on December 8th that the FTC was going to sue Microsoft in an attempt to block its purchase of Activision Blizzard, claiming that the acquisition would, quote, enable Microsoft to suppress competitors to its Xbox gaming consoles and its rapidly growing subscription content and cloud gaming business. Now, the basis of the FTC's argument refers back to when Microsoft bought ZeniMax, who is the parent company of Bethesda, who owns the rights to Starfield, Redfall, and Elder Scrolls 6, 3 games that Microsoft announced shortly after buying ZeniMax were going to be Microsoft exclusives. The FTC's main published argument, straight from the official documents themselves, as to why they are suing Microsoft is that they, quote, assured the European Commission that they would not withhold ZeniMax titles from rival consoles. Shortly after the European Commission cleared the transaction, Microsoft made public its decision to make several of the newly acquired ZeniMax titles, including Starfield, Redfall, and Elder Scrolls 6, Microsoft exclusives. Now, if you want the too long didn't read version of that, this basically means that the FTC claimed that Microsoft previously misled the EC, saying they wouldn't make future Bethesda titles exclusive to Microsoft just to get the EC to clear the purchase, but then following the purchase, made those future titles exclusive anyways, and that the FTC fears that Microsoft will do the same thing with Activision titles once this purchase goes through. Well, it turns out, less than 24 hours later, it was found that this claim from the FTC was actually a full-blown lie. In fact, the European Commission themselves came out and said that, quote, Microsoft didn't make any commitments to EU regulators not to release Xbox exclusive content following its takeover of ZeniMax Media. Meaning that the main argument for the FTC's lawsuit against Microsoft is based off of a fundamental lie, which is going to cause their attempt to block Microsoft's purchase of Activision Blizzard to completely collapse. Well, we won't know for sure what will happen until the European Commission make their final decision on this matter in March of 2023, so we will be waiting a little while before getting more information. But I think it's pretty safe to say that this acquisition will end up going through eventually anyways. On the 13th of December, the CMA even chimed in on the conversation, publishing a response from who they called an unknown market participant, who stated that, quote, while concerns have been raised by Sony in particular, ultimately the CMA's priority is in protecting consumers and not to preserve the status quo of competitors. This transaction will accelerate the transition toward these options and increase the competition that comes with it, which will likely stimulate innovation and the production of quality content for consumers. Which is basically like giving Sony the middle finger and saying, fuck off, our job is to protect the industry, not your bottom line, similar to what the Brazilian regulators had said a couple months prior. So, Cryin Jim Ryan, what do you have to say for yourself? Not even your constant whining to the Federal Trade Commission over Microsoft doing business with Activision will get you what you want. So you might as well do what you should have done from the start and sign that 10-year contract that's been sitting on your desk for weeks. I think it's been obvious from the start, actually, that the reason you are still doing this is because you're not only afraid of losing Call of Duty, but because if you do, in fact, lose Call of Duty, you'll actually have to work to make a decent online FPS for PlayStation that could compete. Think about it. While Xbox has already been making popular online FPS games since 2001 with Halo Combat Evolved, try to see if you can think of one single popular online FPS that has ever been exclusive to PlayStation. Name a single one. And no, Killzone and Mag don't count, I said popular online FPS games. That's right, couldn't find one, could you? So, since Jim Ryan and his simps on Twitter love to talk about how this acquisition is harmful for gamers and harmful for the gaming industry, wouldn't it be very pro-consumer if Microsoft were to make that 10-year deal with Sony and therefore force PlayStation to come up with a way to compete in the online FPS genre? Then we could all have more options on what games to play instead of having to play the same broken COD every other year.
Mission failed. We'll get them next time.
I mean, Call of Duty will stay on PlayStation for at least 10 more years, which I think is more than enough time to figure everything out, especially considering how much can change in 10 years. After all this time, Sony and their fanboys have been wanting nothing more than for PlayStation to stay on top of the gaming industry for all eternity. And it seems like, at least, that the fanboys in particular want nothing more than for Xbox to be burnt to the ground. Although that would just get rid of nearly all of the competition in the industry, wouldn't it? Now, while Jim Ryan and the rest of Sony are crying to regulators about how Microsoft shouldn't be able to make their own decisions, and while the console war will continue to go on until Twitter eventually goes bankrupt or the site just completely implodes, I'm going to step back and watch from the sidelines, drinking my Jamba Juice and enjoying the salt from afar. So with that being said, this is where I'm going to round the video out for today. So I hope you enjoyed watching this video, because if you did, you should consider giving it a thumbs up as well as subscribing to the channel for more videos like this, or better yet, consider checking out my Twitch channel for when I go live. The link for my socials will be in the description below. Also, think about sharing your thoughts in the comment section, as I'm interested in hearing your thoughts on this, and without further ado, I will see you guys in the next video.
Flag taken.